My.
Pretty beautiful.
It is. Where's Larry the Ladder?
I think he's feeling really neglected. He's in that shed and just, he's not getting much attention these days.
Your wife does not want to hear Larry the Ladder. She doesn't need to, I mean.
No, she doesn't.
Yeah, we're looking out. That's Wenatchee. Where the Creator threw rocks everywhere. And there's a lot of rocks down there. If you were to remove all those buildings down there, there'd be just a tremendous lot of boulders that would be visible.
Oh, yeah.
And same way with up here, you can see along the ridge here, there's just, everywhere around here. And I think the most beautiful part growing up here when I was a kid, when I was a child, is that I was surrounded and connected to so many, it seemed to me like real ancient people. My great aunt Lucy Nason from up there where Nason Ridge is originally, her family, she knew every rock had a name. That's how in touch they were with everything here. Every rock had a name, every name had a story behind it. Yeah. For the life of me, I can't remember the names of all the peaks right now.
No, it's just the view of this valley. I've never been up here, embarrassingly, and it's so unique, this valley, wouldn't you say? In so many different ways.
Spectacular.
Yeah.
The creation of it itself. There was a great wall here, up here at one time, back during the days of the great ice, and just the peaks stuck out of the wall of ice. And old timers said that people were already here, and they were blessed because it created just a cornucopia of wonderful foods, wildlife, plants, but that wall of ice, it blocked the salmon from going up. And so in our creation stories, Coyote, who is entrusted with the responsibility of bringing the salmon to the people, he saw it as an obstacle. So he launched himself into the air, and people say that all of a sudden here he come flying back with his long golden tail, striking the glacier, which carved out.
Oh my goodness, really?
Carved out Lake Wenatchee. Everything there was carved out. And the explosion threw rocks everywhere. These rocks you see here were ejected from them. It rained hell on the people, but it released floods that came down, more floods, like we were talking about the Brett's floods. Well, combine that with the Okanagon lobe. Well, old timers say the rocks that we see way out here on the Waterville Plateau were some of the ejection that came as well.
The big haystack rock.
Yeah, as well as the flood, maybe the Missoula floods.
Right.
But they attribute it more to this. So that was our story on Lake Wenatchee, the valley.
Well, just to add to that, Randy, that is super interesting to me, in particular because the geologists 100 years ago thought that a glacier came all the way down the Wenatchee River and possibly filled this valley that we're looking at. And more recently, geologists don't see the evidence for that, but I think it's worth going back and looking at some of that old work to wonder if there really is some glacial deposit here, especially if that story is talking about ice.
And it was in
blocking.
it's in their or it's in our people's oral history.
Yeah.
So that would place us here, what, 12, 13,000 years at least, minimum, which explains a lot. It explains the discovery of the Clovis points right down here. And this is the area that stories say this was the land of the giants with that, the big megafauna. Because you don't go hunting rabbits with Clovis points. I mean, you could, but... And then there's Birch Mountain there, Eagle Point over on the other side, Eagle Rock.
Yeah.
It's Molkanops Walwellum, Eagle Rock. I liked, when I was a kid, I liked coming up here. We dug roots right up there. Right above them. That's where we used to dig bitter roots.
Okay.
And I still go up there because it takes me back 65, 70 years to when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Oh, that would mean that I'm...
I'm not going to do the math.
Okay. Longer than 50 years ago. But I'd go up there with my grand folks, and they would always lay out a quilt, and they always talked about the area. And almost in like a personal friend of theirs. Their relationship to us and the land, us and the rocks was so personal that so I returned to these places. And like I said, I don't really bring a lot of people up here because it's too personal to me.
Yes.
To be able to stand here and explain, it's in a way it's kind of it's not painful as much as it is emotional.
Yeah.
Because I can still hear their voices talking and telling the story, recounting the story of when Coyote brought the salmon. Coyote, and you're right, that's right up from here.
Yeah.
Right below, I think right below the Horse Lake trailhead.
Yeah.
In that basin there is where the big ice started, the wall of ice.
The wall of ice. That's a key part of that story. A wall of ice, and it's right here.
Yeah.
Very.
But it went all the way
up.
So.
Thank you for sharing that. That is significant.
Shmiao, Coyote. He helped create this landscape. Our changer. He changed everything to make way for man who was coming. And the animals, all the animals who walked and talked with each other and with people, they all had a spirit. They all had power. Their Shomach or their Meriam was strong, and man didn't have any. And so the animals needed to help man who is man, the newly emerged man. There was always somebody, but I guess you would call him in anthropological terms, paleo man. But he didn't have power. He got by being a apex predator, but more than that, he was kind of a scavenger, I think. But once the animals realized that the only way they were going to survive, the only way that they were going to move on was to get rid of specksmen, Coyote was entrusted with that responsibility to help them and to help man. And so he engaged all of the animal, everybody, including the plants, to lend a hand and give man their spirit songs, their power. And they did. One by one, every night they would go to the twins. The twins are the hero twins, Red Star and Blue Star, and impart their knowledge to them. And so Coyote was able to help them transfer over and give these twins superpowers. They were our super beings back then. They are our Marvel comic and heroes. But what it did is they surrendered those themselves. So when Specsman is battling the twins down here up to what you call Turtle Rock, Rattlesnake Rock,
Yeah.
these hills were covered, all the animals came to bear witness and to sing their songs of power.
Oh.
So around everywhere here, everywhere that overlooked the valley, there were groups of animals standing, singing, praying, giving them more power. Little by little, they're able to draw their power and use it against the great dragon Specsman. I don't know what the timeline is, whether it was hours. It wasn't hours. It was hours into days. This battle raged all the way up and down. It was so terrific that all the way up in British Columbia, they have paintings of it on the rocks. Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Same dragon, same characters. There's Specsman roaring in defiance with his tail snapping off. But in this depiction of him, there are the twins right here, and they're battling him. And in the air, there's Click-Click, the falcon, who had just ripped his eye out. And that's all on that painting, and I'm going, there is no coincidence here.
Right.
It was such a monumental feat, part of the creation, that it's told everywhere. So that's what helped shape this valley, was that battle and the preceding events that led up to it. So, and that's kind of part of why I like coming up here by Lone Tree.
Oh.
Because that's where we would come up to dig bitterroots.
Really?
And lamatiums, and just sit there. And they would talk about this. Auntie Lucy liked coming here, and Omi Gardens.
Yeah.
Omi Gardens, and sometimes up to Horse Lake Trailhead, up there on the hill. She liked going up there because it meant she could look down and see where her family once lived. Prior to the expulsion of the Wenatchee people, there was 4 villages from the mouth on up to Sunny Slope, then more past that. Or what do you say? I wouldn't call them villages so much as encampments.
Yeah.
And they were there for most of the winter. Then comes this time of the year, they moved over here to Badger Mountain to dig roots and to Moses Coulee. Then go from there to their huckleberry fields. Well, they were out gathering one year, and they came back, and the pioneers had razed their area, burnt down all of their standing Tulimat Lodge frames, and were building their farms. And they were told not to come back. They were driven out of there. And she said her grandparents, or her uncle and aunt that she lived with there, they were helpless to do anything about it. So they left. And she said, 1894, the biggest flood the Wenatchee's ever seen, came down and ripped out all those farms and extended the delta down here by over a mile. She said, what? Gone, pity. She said, so their stuff became part of the foundation of Wenatchee.
So personally, you heard all these stories early in life, and then you left Wenatchee for a majority
Yeah.
of your adult life.
Yeah,
Would you always return here
every year.
regularly? Every year you would come back.
Every year. My granddad told me, he said, every year, I don't care what you're doing, when a meadowlark starts singing, you come home, because that means the roots are coming up. He said, you come home and you dig, because if you don't, Shuiapis will always think it was theirs and it's not yours, and they'll not let you dig. So wherever I was at, I would come home to dig. And a lot of times I'd stop by, grab him, grab my aunts, go over to Wapato Point, grab my Uncle Louis Wapato, and we would come down and dig. It was just that, then after they passed on, I still do it. And I bring my cousins, we still return. It's vital. You know, it's like there's nothing closer than this, to this soil and to this rock, as we are the people who have evolved here for thousands of years. Our DNA, our physical being is closer, it has a closer connection to this soil because of all of the years of evolving with the plants, with the animals, all of the living things here. We reflect it in our DNA. And so I return. I just like returning to hear, again, sage warblers, thrushes, crown sparrows, but the meadowlark. Yeah, he's the what do you call him? The harbinger of spring.
Yes.
And a bluebird. I can hear a bluebird too. It is just a wonderful spot. Okay, we got another. Let's run up to the tree.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, see that open, that bald space there? It's kind of like this here.
Mm-hmm.
That's where your roots, that's where they grow.
Mm.
Because it doesn't like to compete with sagebrush, cheatgrass, or wild rye. And so that's where Grandma and them would always throw their quilt or their tarp and sit there. You can see why. Look at the view.
Oh, yeah.
No cars. And tell the stories. Well, she had us, it was kind of, she did a Huck Finn with us. You know, the old help me paint the fence type thing. Got us interested in digging. Who's going to bring me the biggest root? You know, it's kind of, she was doing coyote strategy. So we'd be running around. Look at this. Looks like the size of a squid. And so we'd go running back. Oh my gosh, yeah, look, that is what. Encouraging us more and more and more. Till we had piles of bitter roots, piles of lomatium sitting there. Her and Auntie would sit there and they'd peel their roots. And Grandpa would just sit there and marvel at the fact that she could get so much work out of us playing.
She probably learned that from her mother and her grandmother.
It's like how to tap that energy.
Yes.
How to tap that energy, how to make it, you know, how to make it work for you. But yeah, we'd run back, pile the roots there, and then we'd sit down with them and drink our Kool-Aid or whatever it was and help them peel roots and listen to the stories. And they were just an inexhaustible source of stories. So it saddens me, like I say, it's kind of an emotional walk down memory lane here.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because when we would come up here in the springtime, it was pristine. Bunch grasses, blue bunch wheatgrass, Idaho fescues, beautiful little delicate, if you can call them, hardy plants here. The lomatiums, what we call jacalosa, spatlum, bitterroot, yuck elk, Mariposa lilies, pongkao, another limatium. It was kind of like the coast. When the tide is out, the table is set. Well, that's here. How people could not thrive, this is basically, Grandma said that this is where people came to up here when the floods were happening. So our footprint is stronger up here on this plateau and up on Badger Mountain higher, like Wenatchee Heights. Our footprint is strong up there because that's where we, our seers, our medicine people always told us that we had to remain. We did not live down there in the old time days. We lived up here. And the belief was that you don't live too close to the bone. In other words, you don't live where your food is, or you'll overexploit it. And so we went down, we gathered our foods and came back up here. And so that's the reason I said our footprint is stronger on these higher benches.
Yes.
And we, the term, I guess, we utilized a greater variety of upper hill plants and animals. Boy, look at that, we're already here.
Well, that makes me wonder if you've got communities at the same time in Western Washington without Ice Age floods coming down their valleys. You think they had the same uplands emphasis, or is this maybe unique to the channeled scablands, where this uplands footprint in the uplands is a direct result of...
Well, the Enumclaw Plateau is a good example.
Okay.
Friends of mine who worked with the look at, there's a nice little big head limatiums. Friends of mine who worked in the anthropology and the archaeology department at the University of Washington. Hello, David. I'm talking about you. They did a lot of, reconnaissance and surveying out there. And they found 10 feet below the surface houses the lahars had covered. And the funny thing is, they're pit houses from this side of the mountains. People here were already starting to make inroads and colonize into that area.
You are kidding me.
No, they're there. It'd be interesting to have one of those people, give their overview, what they saw and what they found.
Yeah.
But 10 feet below.
Is that right?
That's how deep the lahars are. Yeah, they came across an entire village site or encampment, maybe seasonal. No, it was permanent because it was semi-subterranean pit houses. Those were not temporary. Exactly like the kind you find here.
There are here?
Yeah.
Subterranean?
Semi-subterranean pit houses. Two large ones were right at the base, right at the mouth of Stemilt Creek. And the property owner there, we stopped by, the same person that I'm talking about, we stopped by because he was working with DNR, and we're trying to collaborate with farmers so that our Indian people, our indigenous people from these areas, would have cultural easement. But he did the unthinkable. He did not like people going by there. So he took his bulldozer and bulldozed it all. and wiped out 2 pit houses that were incredible sights because they were massive. They were a good 50 feet across. Those were massive. Those are like Mandan and Pawnee earth lodges.
Oh my goodness.
And he destroyed them. Just because he didn't like people going over and leaving offerings. Well, I know who those people were. They're some of my family.
Yeah.
Stamstamilt. It's where the grizzly bears came. Stamilt. Stamstamilt. The grizzly bears came down during fishing season. They would come down that canyon. And I had an old-timer ancestor of mine who had the vision of this great grizzly. He said, in my dreams, he told his family, I keep having this dream, and it's of this gigantic, he said it was the grizzly bear king, grizzly bear chief, and he's walking, and his head is just going side to side, making noise. He said, then he looks up and raises, and that's the end of the dream. And one of the, we call Indian doctors, one of the holy people said, that's not a dream, that's your vision. That's your destiny. He said, you go to the top of Stamilt Pinnacles there, Specksman's backbone. You go up there and you, what do you say? You get in contact with your shomach and Mariam. You tap your medicine and your power, and then it'll tell you what to do. And he said, while he sat there, I guess you could say in a state of fasting, and you're in denying yourself water and food, he said, I saw that vision again and where I had to be. He said, I went down to the canyon floor there, right about where the Bryants live, where Betty Bryant lives.
Yep.
He said, and I made a little fire and I burnt my medicine there. He said, then I sat there, and he said, and I just, inside me, I sang to myself. I asked for strength. And then he said, I looked up, and from just over the horizon, I could see that hump coming. Then he said, and just like the dream, he said, it lifted, looked up, bellowed at the air. He said, and I lifted up, and he said, I was dressed like I was going to war, just my breechcloth on, and my yellow head. He had a hammer that was made out of yellow jade, his war axe. He said, and I bellowed, and it bellowed, and we came running at each other, he said. And just as he got to it, he said, I dropped, it lifted like in the dream. I put 2 arrows inside of it, and he dropped. It didn't stop him, and he kept coming at me. And I took my war axe, he said, and I slammed him into the head, and then flipped over his back and spun around and did him. He said, I took his skin and I put it on with his feet and his claws, and I wore it back to Stamstamil, to the village there. He said, everybody, I guess you could say, they all applauded him because he had fulfilled that vision and that dream. And he would become the head man or the spokesman, maybe you could say chief of that village. When did this happen? Oh, long before Sri Apis came, before Shama. Isn't this wonderful? Look at this garden.
It's a garden. It's a garden.
Take a shot of that.
Yes.
In a land that's generally doesn't give up anything.
Yep.
Look at this. There's your medicines.
This is exactly what you remember.
Yep. Here's our chocolosa, our white camas. It's actually a lamatium. Biscuit root is what pioneers called it. Back in the day, there was many chances for this land to have, what do you say, won out over the pioneers. But the Indian people here, they still felt like they were responsible for the new occupants coming in, the new pioneer families. And there was times in which there was great famine, starvation amongst them. Not amongst us, but amongst them. Finally, after World War I, and the pioneer families were really suffering, we were entering the period of the Great Depression. Our families showed them how to survive off the land. All this here that you just call weeds, they all have power. They all have value. They're either medicine. You look out here. What do you see? I see the pharmacy. I see the grocery store. I see the hardware store. It's all here in one bite. Materials for construction of your sweat lodge, they kind of got burnt up. They got toasted here.
Yeah.
Last year. But all the foods, this is your pantry right here. How could they starve? Well, they had to first make up their minds that these were good. That they weren't, what do you say, awful.
Yeah.
And so we taught them how to survive, kind of like a retelling of the Pilgrims, how they starved. We might want to rethink that story now, but
Yeah.
if we had to revisit it.
So are there families with young children out doing things today that
Yeah,
you're describing from long
you know,
ago?
we were out the other day, and there were people from the tribe that were down with their little family units.
Good.
And we all have our own areas that we kind of count as our own digging spots. And everybody kind of respects that, pretty much. Newcomers come in, they don't know it, and so they don't have digging etiquette, just woefully culturally deprived. They just think they can dig anywhere. And it's not their fault. Residential school helped conspire
Yeah.
in that. And it destroyed a lot of the cultural teachings, or it cut it off. One generation removed is all it took.
Yeah.
And this time of the year, the most important time, our kids would be in boarding schools somewhere, being denied the ability to participate. And so it's not their fault. But we have ways of doing things. We don't just take without giving something. So we start out with prayers, with ceremonies, with songs, with offerings. And I got a really wonderful charge out of my nephew, who brought his son, who's 3.5 years old, with him. And his son got out there and he took pennies and he offered pennies. And he was talking in Indian, saying thank you. Lam lam chahalosha, lam lam toyan chutin, or kudan chutin, they say in their dialect. Lam lam toyan chutin, thank you, Creator. Lam lam mam omt, Holy Mother Earth. The little kid already has the teachings. And then he proceeded to follow me all over and dig beside me. And he managed to find the 3 largest roots. I'm going, he's genuine. Creator's already blessing him, encouraging him. So
That's got to feel good.
oh my God, yes. And then when we sat down to take a break and to have a snack, we asked him if he wanted a cupcake. No, I want chakalusa. He wanted the root.
Okay.
That big root. No, don't eat the big one. But he dug it. He got it. He goes, it smells good.